I still remember the smell of her perfume, rose and arrogance, before I even saw her. Margaret Shaw, my mother-in-law. That day, she stood in my living room in Atlanta, eyes cold as glass, her pearls gleaming like tiny nooses around her neck. She didn't knock. She never did. She just let herself in, walked around like she owned the place, and said, "You'll never be good enough for my son, Ava. You should know that." Her words stung harder than I expected. I had spent months trying to earn her respect, baking her favorite lemon cake, visiting her every Sunday, listening to her stories about how real women hold a family together. But none of it mattered. To her, I was the outsider, the woman who trapped her only son into marriage. When Daniel came home that night, she was already sitting beside him, crying, fake tears shimmering in her eyes. "She's disrespectful to me. Danny, she wants to take you away from your family." He looked at me with confusion, and for the first time, doubt. That's how it started. The war I never wanted, with a woman who smiled at my pain. That night, as I lay in bed beside my husband, feeling his silence more than his warmth, I whispered to myself, if she wants a fight, she just declared one. Before the storm came, there was peace, and love so beautiful it almost felt holy. Daniel Shaw wasn't just any man. He was charm wrapped in confidence, with eyes that made promises and a voice that made you believe them. We met at a charity gala in downtown Atlanta. I was an interior designer, volunteering to decorate the venue. He was the heir to Shaw and Company Enterprises, walking through the crowd like he owned the night. When our eyes met, everything else blurred. He was the kind of man who made you feel seen, really seen. Within months, he proposed in Savannah under a sky lit with fireworks. His mother wasn't there. She claimed she was too ill to travel, though I later learned she simply refused to come. Still, I believed love could conquer anything. We married quietly, surrounded by friends and laughter. I remember thinking, this is my forever. Daniel was gentle, kind, and protective. But even then, I noticed the small things. The way he flinched whenever his mother called. The way he'd lower his voice before answering. I didn't know it then, but Margaret Shaw had already begun her game. She had plans for her son's life, and I was never part of them. I just didn't know how far she was willing to go to erase me. If elegance had a face, it would have been hers. Margaret Shaw moved like royalty, polished nails, tailored suits, every word dripping with charm. But behind that smile lived a venom she reserved just for me. It began with whispers. Small, harmless at first. "Ava's a lovely girl, but she's not really our kind." "Interior design? That's not a career, darling. It's a hobby." She never said it to me directly. She planted her seeds in Daniel's mind, one dinner conversation at a time. Then came the accidents. Daniel's business emails mysteriously ended up in my inbox. His mother claimed she must have forwarded them by mistake. I once overheard her on the phone, her voice low but sharp. "She's not fit for you, Danny. She'll drag your name into mediocrity." I tried to ignore it, to keep smiling and showing respect. But each time Daniel came home, he was colder, quieter, distant. The woman who once hugged me at our engagement party now greeted me with a calculated smile. And when I looked into her eyes, I realized she wasn't just trying to break my marriage. She was trying to erase me completely. That was when I began keeping notes, dates, words, moments, because deep down I knew one day I'd need proof. Proof for the war she didn't know I was preparing for. It started with silence. Not the peaceful kind. The heavy, suffocating one that grows between two people who used to talk for hours. Daniel no longer laughed at my jokes. He stayed late at the office more often. When he came home, he smelled faintly of his mother's perfume, that rose scent that haunted me. At first, I told myself it was stress, business pressures. But one evening, he came home furious. He tossed his phone on the couch and said, "Mom said you told her I should stop giving her money. Did you really say that, Ava?" My mouth fell open.
"What? No."
"I'd never." He cut me off. She wouldn't lie about something like that. That night, I learned what real betrayal felt like, not from strangers, but from the person who vowed to protect you. Margaret's lies had done their job. The trust between Daniel and me was cracking. Every word I said sounded like an excuse to him. Every tear looked like manipulation. One Sunday, she came over with that same smug smile and said, "Oh, Ava dear, marriages are fragile. You should take care not to break what you can't fix." I watched her leave, her heels clicking against the marble floor, each step a declaration of victory. And that was the first night I cried myself to sleep wondering if love was enough to fight evil dressed as family. Margaret's masterstroke came on a Friday night. She called it a family dinner to make peace. I should have known better. The table at her mansion in Buckhead gleamed like a magazine spread, candles, silverware, and that familiar chill in the air that followed her presence. Daniel looked uneasy, but hopeful. "Let's just go," he said. "Maybe she's trying." When we arrived, she greeted me with a kiss on the cheek. "Ava, dear, you look well-rested. I suppose not working much does that for you." Her laughter floated like poison in the air. Dinner went smoothly at first, until a young man arrived late. Ethan, a contractor I had once worked with.
He looked confused when he saw me.
"Ava? I didn't know you'd be here." Margaret's eyes glittered. "Oh, you two know each other?" she asked sweetly. Before I could answer, she slid her phone across the table. On the screen was a photo, me and Ethan in my office, laughing over coffee, nothing inappropriate, but from the right angle it looked intimate. Daniel's face went pale. "What is this?" I stammered. "It's not what it looks like." Margaret sighed dramatically. "I told you, son. Some women just can't be trusted." The room spun. I could feel Daniel's trust collapsing like glass. He stood up, his voice cold. "Let's go, Ava. We're done here." Margaret smiled as I followed him out, her plan complete. That night, I realized she didn't just want to ruin my marriage. She wanted to destroy me. Daniel didn't speak a word on the drive home. The streetlights flickered against his face, hard, cold, unreadable. When we got inside, he went straight to our bedroom, grabbed a suitcase, and started packing. "Daniel, please," I whispered, my voice trembling. "That photo isn't what it looks like." "She set me up?" He turned sharply. "My mother warned me, Ava. I didn't want to believe her, but you just keep proving her right." Those words sliced deeper than any blade. I reached for him, but he stepped back, his eyes filled with something worse than anger, disappointment. Within an hour, he was gone. The door slammed, leaving me alone with silence and 1,000 questions echoing in my chest. Days turned into weeks. My name spread like wildfire through Atlanta's social circles. The cheating wife. The gold digger. The woman who ruined Daniel Shaw.
Client cancelle contract.
Friends stopped calling. Even my landlord gave me notice. I went from designing mansions to sleeping on a couch in a friend's studio apartment. Margaret won. Or so she thought. One evening, I stood in front of a mirror, pale, exhausted, and angry. And for the first time, I said it aloud. No one destroys me and gets away with it. Not even her. It wasn't rage anymore. It was clarity. She took my home, my husband, my name, but I still had something she didn't. The will to rise. Atlanta had never felt so loud until I found myself invisible in it. The city moved on, cars honking, people laughing, life continuing, while I sat in a tiny studio apartment, staring at the ceiling and replaying every moment that led to my downfall. I used to cry every night, until one morning I simply stopped. Something inside me shifted. The tears dried, and in their place came a strange calm. The kind you feel before lightning strikes. I sold my engagement ring and used the money to buy a second-hand laptop. I spent hours reading about business management, interior architecture, and design marketing. If Margaret wanted to make me small, I would grow so large that she'd choke on her own arrogance. I started sketching again, fresh, bold ideas, nothing like what the Atlanta elites were used to. Designs that spoke of strength born from pain. One night, as thunder rolled outside, I wrote her name on a sticky note, Margaret Shaw, and stuck it on the wall beside my desk. Not out of hate, out of motivation. You wanted to destroy me, I whispered, staring at her name. But all you did was wake me up. It was quiet revenge at first, invisible, patient, unstoppable. And as I watched the rain blur the city lights, I promised myself one thing. The next time she saw me, I wouldn't be the broken wife. I'd be the storm she never saw coming. It was raining the morning I met Liam Carter. I was sitting in a small cafe downtown, laptop open, trying to design a proposal I knew no one would read. My savings were running out, and I'd just been rejected by another firm. I remember thinking, maybe Margaret was right. Maybe I really am nothing. Then, an older man approached my table. That design, he said, pointing to my screen. It's bold. Who are you designing for? I looked up. He was in his early 60s, gray-haired, sharply dressed, with kind eyes that saw right through me. Just for practice, I muttered. He smiled faintly. You've got vision. Most designers play safe. You take risks. He slid a card across the table. Liam Carter, former CEO, Carter Group Real Estate. I blinked. You're that Liam Carter? He chuckled. Guilty. But I'm retired now. These days, I help people who deserve a second chance. You look like you could use one. That conversation lasted 2 hours. I told him everything, not about Margaret, but about losing myself. He didn't pity me. He only said, pain refines. Use it. Don't run from it. By the time we finished our coffee, I had a mentor. A door had opened, quietly, but purposefully. And as I walked home that night, drenched in rain but smiling for the first time in months, I knew my comeback had just begun. Liam Carter didn't just mentor me. He rebuilt me. Our lessons began in his glass-walled office overlooking downtown Atlanta, every morning at 7 a.m. sharp. He'd hand me a black notebook and say, "Today, you learn the language of power." He taught me everything from financial statements to negotiation tactics, from corporate psychology to strategic silence. He said, people with real influence don't shout. They make others listen by saying less. I studied day and night. Numbers became my armor. Business laws became my weapons. When I made mistakes, Liam didn't comfort me. He'd simply say, you can cry or you can learn. You can't do both. There were days I wanted to quit, but every time I thought of Margaret's smug smile, the fire inside me burned hotter. Months passed. I refined my skills, created a portfolio of innovative design projects, and started networking under a new name, Ava Coleman Interiors. I wanted no pity, no connection to the Shaws. Just my work. Liam looked at me one afternoon and said, "You're ready. But remember, revenge isn't won by rage. It's won by results." And when he said those words, I smiled because I knew the storm had learned to move in silence. It started in a one-bedroom apartment with peeling wallpaper and second-hand furniture, Ava Space Interiors. I registered the business online at 2:13 a.m., the moment the idea finally stopped whispering and started roaring inside me. My first logo was hand-drawn, my website built from free templates, but my vision was clear: design spaces that told stories of resilience. Liam invested a modest $20,000 to help me start, but his only condition was simple: make every client feel like you're designing the life they wish they had. The first few months were brutal. No one knew my name. Some days, I handed out flyers myself at construction sites. Other days, I worked 12 hours straight on virtual mock-ups for clients who never replied. But slowly, something shifted. One client became two became five: small restaurants, boutique offices, renovated homes. They loved my designs because they were different, bold, emotional, alive. I started posting my work online, sharing each design story. Within a year, Ava Space Interiors wasn't just a company. It was a movement. One morning, Liam looked at my growing client list and said, "Congratulations, Ava. You've built something no one can take from you now." But as I stared at my first real office sign gleaming under the sunlight, a thought struck me. Margaret Shaw hadn't seen anything yet, because the next name on my client list would bring me right back into her world. It was a Wednesday morning when the email arrived, subject line, design proposal, Shaw Properties, Atlanta expansion. I froze.
Shaw.
That name felt like a ghost dragging me back into a past I'd buried. The message was from a property development firm affiliated with Shaw and Company. They were seeking an independent designer for a luxury residential project in Buckhead, the same neighborhood where Margaret lived. Liam noticed my hesitation. You're afraid of ghosts, he said, sipping his coffee.
Good.
Ghosts remind you of what you've survived. Now go show them who you've become. I took the job. At the first meeting, I walked into a sleek conference room filled with executives. My heart raced, but I kept my voice steady as I presented my design. Modern architecture with warmth and humanity. No one spoke when I finished. Then the chairman, an older gentleman, smiled and said, Miss Coleman, this is exceptional. You've got the contract. I thanked him and walked out, trying to breathe. It wasn't just a project, it was validation. The girl Margaret tried to erase had just won over her Empire's associates. That night, as I looked over the signed documents, I laughed softly. The irony was too delicious. Through sheer skill and silence, I had just stepped into the one place Margaret never wanted me near again, her world. Only this time, I wasn't coming as a wife. I was coming as a force. 2 weeks into the project, I was buried in blueprints and color palettes when my project manager, Nia, rushed in with a smile. Guess what, Ava? We got another luxury proposal. Big one from Shaw and Company itself. My pen slipped from my hand. Shaw and Company. I repeated, my voice calm, though my heart pounded like thunder. Nia nodded. Their Atlanta office is expanding. They want to revamp their entire executive floor, and they personally requested AvaSpace interiors. Seems someone was impressed by your Buckhead work. I leaned back slowly, staring at the name on the document. Project lead, Margaret Shaw, vice chair. For a moment, the air left the room. The same woman who once called me a mistake in her son's life was now indirectly offering me a seat at her company's table. Liam, when I told him, just smiled that knowing smile. Poetic, isn't it? Life has a way of bringing the powerful to the feet of the ones they tried to destroy. I accepted the project immediately. Not for revenge. Not yet, but for revelation. The first site visit was scheduled for Monday. As I ironed my suit that morning, I looked in the mirror and whispered, This time, Margaret, I won't be coming through your door as your daughter-in-law. I'll be walking in as your equal and soon, your superior. And deep down, I knew the real game had just begun. The lobby of Shaw and Company gleamed like a monument to arrogance. Marble floors, gold fixtures, and portraits of the Shaw family lining the walls. I'd walked through those doors once as a trembling wife. This time, I walked in as Ava Coleman, CEO of AvaSpace Interiors, and not a trace of fear in sight. The receptionist led me to the boardroom. My heels clicked in perfect rhythm with my heartbeat. When the doors opened, time seemed to stop. There she was, Margaret Shaw, flawless as ever. Pearls, red lipstick, that same air of superiority. But when her eyes met mine, something flickered, disbelief, maybe even fear. She blinked, forcing a smile. Well, this is unexpected. I smiled back, calm and deliberate. Mrs. Shaw, thank you for considering AvaSpace Interiors. It's an honor to collaborate with your company. The other executives watched, oblivious to the storm between us. I presented my proposal, confident, composed, unshakable. Margaret interrupted once, twice, trying to trip me up with questions, but every time, I answered with precision. When the meeting ended, the chairman clapped lightly. Brilliant work, Miss Coleman. We'll move forward immediately. Margaret's face tightened, but she forced a polite nod. Impressive indeed. As I gathered my files, I turned to her and said softly, I look forward to working closely with you again. Her smile froze. She knew exactly what I meant. The prey she once hunted had just walked back into her kingdom as a lion. From the moment I re-entered her world, Margaret Shaw made it clear this wasn't going to be business as usual. She didn't shout or confront me directly. No, Margaret was far too cunning for that. She attacked the way she always had, with whispers, smiles, and sabotage hidden behind polished words. At first, it was subtle. Blueprints I submitted mysteriously got lost. Emails went missing from company servers. Budget approvals delayed, without reason. I recognized her fingerprints on everything. She was trying to frustrate me into quitting. But this time, I wasn't the naive girl desperate for her approval. I documented everything. Every missing file, every change order, every suspicious delay. And while she thought she was playing me, I was quietly building a case. During one meeting, she smirked and said, "You're talented, Ava, but corporate projects are a different league. Perhaps you're out of your depth." I met her gaze, calm and steady. "Maybe. But tides change, Mrs. Shaw. They always do." The room went silent. For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. That night, Liam called after reviewing my reports. "You're handling her well," he said. "But don't fight on her battlefield. Build your own." And that's when I made the decision that would change everything, to quietly begin acquiring shares in Shaw and Company. If she wanted war, I'd give her one she couldn't see coming. The first time I saw Daniel again, it felt like time tripped. It was during a project inspection on the Shaw and Company executive floor. I was reviewing a layout when I heard that familiar voice behind me, deeper now, but unmistakable. "Ava." I turned slowly. There he stood, Daniel Shaw, my ex-husband, the man who once believed every lie his mother fed him. For a brief moment, neither of us spoke. His eyes searched mine, maybe for guilt, maybe for the woman he destroyed. But all he found was composure. "Mr. Shaw," I said evenly, "I'm here on business." He nodded awkwardly, glancing at my designs pinned across the walls. "You did all this?" "Yes," I replied. "Avaspace Interiors. We're handling your corporate renovation." I saw the flicker of surprise and something like pride. "You've done well for yourself." I smiled faintly. Some lessons cost everything. I made sure to learn from mine. He looked away, guilt written across his face. But Margaret was watching from across the room, her expression unreadable. I could almost hear her thoughts. "She's not supposed to be here. She's supposed to be gone." Daniel didn't know it yet, but his mother's empire was slowly shifting beneath her feet, and I was the one moving the pieces. As I packed my documents, I caught his reflection in the glass, still watching me. The silent observer. The man who would soon realize the truth far too late. It happened gradually, almost invisibly, the way dawn replaces darkness. While Margaret kept playing her petty games, I was making quiet moves in the shadows. Through Liam's connections, I found out that Shaw and Company was privately traded, with minority shareholders eager to sell due to internal mismanagement. I began acquiring small blocks of shares, discreetly, patiently, through shell investments and silent partners. Every week, a little more of her empire became mine. At work, my project had become the company's crown jewel. Executives praised my designs. Industry magazines started writing about Avaspace Interiors. Margaret's attempts to downplay my work only made me shine brighter. During one board meeting, an executive joked, "If we had more people like Miss Coleman, Shaw and Company wouldn't be struggling." The room laughed. Margaret didn't. Her knuckles tightened around her pen. After the meeting, she cornered me near the elevator. "You think you've won something here, don't you?" she hissed. I met her eyes calmly. "Not yet. But I will." She leaned in. "You forget who you're dealing with." I smiled faintly. "So, do you?" As the elevator doors closed between us, I caught my reflection. No longer the woman she once broke, but the architect of her undoing. The shift had begun. She just didn't know the floor beneath her feet was already mine. The fall of a queen never begins with a crash. It starts with whispers. Margaret's perfect reputation at Shaw and Company began to rot quietly. A few anonymous emails reached the board, exposing her misuse of company funds and insider favoritism. Nothing illegal yet, but enough to raise suspicion. Her polished image started to crumble in meetings. I didn't have to lift a finger. The seeds she planted years ago, her arrogance, her enemies, were finally blooming. I just watered the soil. She started making mistakes, missing key presentations, snapping at staff, even arriving late to meetings. Once, during a board review, she publicly took credit for my designs. But this time, the CEO himself corrected her. Actually, this concept came from Avaspace Interiors. Ms. Coleman deserves that recognition. The silence that followed was deafening. Margaret's face turned pale. I could almost hear her pride shattering. Later that evening, Daniel called. His voice was hesitant, softer than I remembered. Ava, Mom's not doing well. She says people are turning against her. I stared out the window at the glittering city below. Sometimes, I said quietly, life just returns what we send into it. He was silent for a long time. You've changed. Yes, I whispered. Because she forced me to. That night, I knew. The woman who once broke my marriage was finally cracking under her own poison. But I wasn't done yet. It began with an invitation. I sent Margaret a handwritten note on ivory stationery, the kind she used to send out when she hosted her lavish charity galas. Dinner at the Langston, 7 p.m. Just the two of us. I believe we have unfinished business.
Ava.
The Langston, downtown Chicago, her favorite restaurant. The same place she once told me I didn't belong because women like me dine at buffets, not at linen tables. When she arrived that evening, I was already seated, confident, calm, draped in midnight blue silk. The maitre d' greeted me like royalty. Margaret looked startled to see me in her world, comfortable, commanding. For the first time, she seemed small. I smiled warmly. You look beautiful, Margaret. It's been too long. She narrowed her eyes. Why now? Because closure, I said softly, is a luxury. And I can afford it now. Dinner was quiet, civil, but underneath every polite exchange was tension sharp enough to draw blood. She probed for weakness, asked about Daniel, about my success, but every answer reminded her I'd survived everything she'd tried to destroy. As dessert arrived, I slid an envelope across the table.
She frowned.
What's this? An opportunity, I said. For you to remember humility. Inside were documents, a corporate acquisition notice. My company had just become the primary design partner and partial stakeholder of Shaw and Company *. Her jaw tightened as she read my name beside the new partnership clause. You're bluffing, she whispered. I leaned in. I never bluff. Her glass trembled in her hand. The dinner was over, but the real feast, her downfall, had only begun. The boardroom was cold that morning. The kind of silence that carries electricity. Everyone was there. Daniel, the executives, and Margaret, sitting at the head of the table like a queen about to lose her crown. She didn't know yet that today would change everything. The CEO began the meeting. Before we proceed with quarterly reports, we'd like to welcome our new strategic partner, Avaspace Interiors. Whispers rippled around the table. Margaret froze. New partner, she asked. The CEO nodded. Ms. Ava Coleman's firm has acquired a significant share in Shaw and Company, with board voting rights. She'll be joining us as a creative and corporate advisor. The room erupted in polite applause. I stood slowly, my heels echoing against the marble floor. Thank you. It's an honor to contribute to a company that once underestimated me. Margaret's lips trembled. This is absurd. You can't just... Oh, but I can. I interrupted gently. Business is a language I learned from the best you. Daniel stared at me, stunned. Ava, you own part of Shaw and Company? I met his eyes. Let's just say I believe in investing where I was once undervalued. Margaret rose, furious. This is revenge. I smiled faintly.
No.
This is balance. She stormed out of the room, her heels cracking against the tile like gunfire. As the door slammed shut, a calm settled over me. Years of humiliation, lies, and pain, all avenged without raising my voice. In that room, I wasn't the broken daughter-in-law anymore. I was the boss she never saw coming. Daniel showed up at my office 2 days later unannounced. He stood by the glass wall overlooking Chicago's skyline, the same city where I once started over, with nothing but shame and a suitcase. "Ava," he began softly, "I need to understand something. Did you plan all of this?" I leaned back in my chair, studying him. His tone wasn't angry, just confused, almost regretful. "Not at first," I said. "At first, I just wanted to survive. But surviving wasn't enough anymore." He swallowed hard. "You bought into Shaw and Company. My mother's legacy. Your mother's illusion," I corrected gently. "Do you know how many people she's destroyed? I was just one of them." He lowered his eyes. "She told me you were cheating, that you wanted my money." I let out a quiet laugh, bitter, not amused. "And you believed her?" He sighed deeply, shame flickering across his face. "I was young, blind." "Blindness is forgivable," I said. "Cruelty isn't." He looked at me then, really looked, as if seeing me for the first time. "The strength, the quiet grace, the fire. You didn't just rise from what she did," he said softly. "You built an empire out of the ashes." For a moment, silence filled the room, heavy but cleansing. Then I said what I'd been waiting years to say. "Daniel, I never wanted to destroy your mother. I just wanted her to remember what destruction feels like." His voice broke. "You already won, Ava. Maybe it's time to stop fighting." But I wasn't done. Not yet. The final lesson still awaited her, poetic, public, and irreversible. The night glittered like a secret. The Shaw and Company annual charity gala, a tradition Margaret started years ago to flaunt her influence, was now under my management. As part of our new partnership, I was the events co-chair. The ballroom at the Chicago Regency sparkled with crystal chandeliers and silver linens. Journalists, investors, and city officials gathered, unaware that tonight wasn't just a celebration, it was a revelation. Margaret arrived late, her diamonds catching the light, her smile forced. She looked around and froze when she saw the banner behind the stage. Presented by Ava Space Interiors, in collaboration with Shaw and Company. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. I greeted her warmly. "Margaret, you made it. You'll want to stay for the presentation. It's quite enlightening." When it was time, I took the stage. Cameras flashed. Daniel sat in the audience, tense, unsure. "Tonight," I began, "we honor those who build legacies, not through deceit or dominance, but through integrity." A video played behind me, a highlight reel of Shaw and Company's milestones. But then, subtly, the tone shifted. Internal reports appeared, memos signed by Margaret, evidence of funds diverted, staff mistreated, partnerships manipulated. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Margaret stood, shaking. "This is a lie. You can't." But the documents had been verified by her own board. I looked down from the stage, my voice calm, controlled. "Sometimes, Mrs. Shaw, truth doesn't destroy reputations, it reveals them." The applause that followed wasn't for her. It was for freedom. Margaret left in silence, her empire of glass shattering with every step. The morning after the gala, the news spread like wildfire. Every major Chicago outlet ran the same headline. Shaw and Company. Under investigation, CFO implicated in financial misconduct. Margaret's face was everywhere, no longer the elegant matriarch, but a scandal headline. The board demanded her immediate resignation. Investors began pulling out. Her friends stopped returning her calls. I watched it unfold from my office window, coffee in hand, peace in my chest. Daniel came by, his expression heavy. "She's being stripped of her position, Ava. They're calling it ethical restructuring." I nodded. That's a polished way of saying justice.
He sighed.
"She's devastated. She won't even speak to me." I turned to him. "Neither did I, when she convinced you I was the problem." Silence stretched between us, filled with years of unspoken pain. Later that afternoon, I received an anonymous letter. Inside was a single line, written in a trembling hand. "You've taken everything from me. I hope it was worth it. MS." I read it twice before tucking it into my drawer. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. Because revenge, I'd learned, doesn't taste sweet. It tastes finished. Margaret had fallen not by my lies, but by her own. I had only held up the mirror. And in that reflection, the Queen finally saw herself. 2 weeks after her resignation, I went to see her. Margaret now lived alone in her Lake Forest estate, the same mansion where she once humiliated me over dinner, surrounded by silver and servants. Only this time, the gates were half open, the grass overgrown, the windows dim. When she opened the door, I barely recognized her. The proud posture was gone. She looked smaller, wrapped in a faded cardigan instead of designer silk. "Ava," she said flatly, "come to enjoy the view?" I shook my head.
No.
"I came to give you something." I handed her a folder, the final paperwork confirming her removal from Shaw and Company. It was over, but there was something else inside, a personal check. Enough to cover her mortgage for a year. She looked at it, confused.
Why?
"Because mercy," I said quietly, "is the difference between us." Her eyes filled with tears, though pride wouldn't let them fall. "You could have destroyed me completely." "I could have," I replied. "But destruction doesn't heal the broken. It just multiplies pain." For the first time, she looked at me not with hatred, but something close to respect. "You remind me of myself before the power got to me." I smiled sadly. "Then let this be your mirror, Margaret. You can still change who you see." I left her standing there, surrounded not by luxury, but by the echo of her choices. And for the first time, I didn't feel vengeance. I felt peace. A month later, I stood before the board of Shaw and Company again, but this time, not as an adversary. They had called a special meeting to discuss leadership restructuring. With Margaret gone, the company was adrift. Profits were falling. Morale was broken. One of the directors turned to me. "Miss Coleman, you've proven capable beyond expectation. Would you consider taking over as Chief Creative Officer?" The room fell silent. Every eye was on me. The woman who'd once been cast out, now being invited to rebuild the very empire that tried to bury her. I thought of Margaret's trembling hands, of Daniel's guilt, of the young woman I used to be, desperate for approval. Then I spoke. "I'll accept on one condition. Margaret Shaw stays on the advisory board. No authority, no titles, just a voice. A reminder." The board exchanged surprised glances, but agreed. Later, when Daniel heard, he called me. "You'd really work with her again? After everything?" I smiled softly. She taught me how to fight. Now, maybe, she can learn how to build. He was quiet for a long time before saying, "You've become everything she tried to destroy." I laughed lightly. "No, Daniel. I became what she could have been if she hadn't chosen hate over humanity." A year later, I stood on the same stage where my humiliation had once begun, the Shaw and Company annual gala. Only now, the banners read, "Rebuilding with Integrity, a new chapter for Shaw and Company." The audience applauded as I walked to the podium. Cameras flashed, capturing the woman who had once been dismissed,